Sam Khan, our Thursday, 3:30. It's con time, as they say, and as our viewers say as well. Sam, thank you very much. You know, in the last 5 years, we have seen so many changes in college athletics, college football, the realignment, all of the NIL transfer, just it's insane. And the coaching carousel this year, more bizarre than ever before. You are a young pup, so you have been a part of this too. Did you ever think you would have so much to cover that sometimes had nothing to do with on the field?
Yeah, actually, my job entails mostly covering what goes on off the field. Obviously, we're less than a month away from the transfer portal opening officially, so that's a big part of it, obviously. But it's funny because early in my career as a reporter, particularly in college sports, I would cover college football, and then in the winter or early spring, I would do college basketball in the NCAA tournament, and then late spring, I would do the College World Series or softball regionals or something like that. And then we'd go back to football around media days, but that doesn't exist anymore. Like I cover football 12 months a year, every day. So I don't do those other things anymore because there's so much going on, but it has changed a lot. The thing is it's changed for everybody, and not even just in terms of consumption for us, but the way these programs operate. It is really almost a 365-day-a-year endeavor to run a college football program.
Yeah, and nobody can agree on what the calendar should be, although I'm sure you saw Joey McGuire basically like lining up like, hey, we move everything up like a week and a half. Like a lot of these problems just kind of naturally work themselves out, and I have a feeling that if you brought that to the leaders of college athletics, they'd be like, a week? What are you, nuts? Like, how can we do a week? My God, like, why don't we just play it? Why don't we just play in February? Like, let's just move it. As soon as it ends, we start it again. Then like, no, I mean, just you move it up a week, everything could work out on that end, and then you can kind of make some minor tweaks in the back end, Sam.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to address this, and I don't necessarily disagree with Joey on moving it up a week, but I like starting in late August. I think the answer is getting rid of conference championship games. Make that your first round of the playoffs, or make that a bye, and then the first round of the playoffs is the week after. Because that is what I think is one of the big reasons. There's two reasons why the game schedule as long as it is we used to play many years ago. I'm sure you guys remember, you're old enough to remember, we used to play 11 regular season games, not 12. And then we didn't have conference championship games until the 1990s. The SEC was the first conference to do that, I believe, in 1992. And so conference championship games are not a thing that have existed for 80 or 90 years. They've only existed for 33 years. So this is not something that I think is sacred. Now, a lot of conferences don't want to get rid of it because of the money. However, I would argue that the money that you get from the playoff, if you happen to expand it at some point, probably replaces the money that you would lose from getting rid of a conference championship game. That said, one thing that I do find annoying is coaches complaining about a calendar that largely they created. We have early signing period because coaches wanted it. We have a winter transfer portal window because coaches said, well, we can't have the portal going on all year round. Let's have a window. And so we have windows now. And so these are things that I find it interesting that coaches are blaming the calendar when they're the ones who push for a lot of these moves to the calendar.
Sam, on the conference championship games, they all have to mean the same thing. I think that's part of the argument. Like, I am fine if they keep them. I'm also fine if they get rid of them, if they are acknowledging we're getting rid of them, because in the Big Ten and the SEC, they don't mean the same thing that they do in literally every other league. I mean, Alabama has literally no stakes. They can be 10-3. I mean, theoretically, they have, because of the way that, like, okay, well, both the teams in the SEC championship are going to get in, even though that would be their third loss, and they have a bad loss. Then there's a team called Texas that has a bad loss that's out as well. The Big Ten, both those teams are undefeated, so one loss that shouldn't, but that should be an outlier. As where the Big 12, both teams with one loss, if the worst one loses, then they're out. So they have stakes here. The only way they can get in is to win. I think that you got to make everything mean the same thing or get rid of it.
Yeah, that's why I think you get rid of it. You just let your conference standings, or let the conference determine who it wants to send. Does it want to send its number one team in terms of conference standings? Does it want to send its team with the highest playoff ranking for your one guaranteed bid? Because I think, like, for instance, even to the Big 12, it really only stands to help BYU or hurt BYU. I don't think it's gonna. The only way it can hurt Texas Tech is potentially drop it out of a top 4 slot. Like, Texas Tech's not going to miss the playoff if they lose this thing. Whereas in the American, it is a play-in game. The winner gets in. So I think conference title games have kind of outlived their utility to a certain degree, especially as the playoff is where it is. And if the playoff expands further, I don't see any reason to keep them around. The only reason to keep them around is you want the money for it. But even then, you start to look at the crowds at some of these things, and the more meaning that is taken away from them because of an expanded playoff, I think the less crowd you're going to see at these things.
Yeah, the SEC and the ESPN does not want to lose that game. They do not want to lose that game because they put a lot of money into it, and the SEC doesn't want to lose that game because of the money, as you said, that they get in return. So, Kalani Sitake, Penn State, yet another target that ended up getting the money in the bag. And this thing got a little dicey on Monday, and then it works itself out. I love the guy. I'm glad he's going to be around. They got the game Saturday, but just the way BYU had to react to that, and the fact we found out that they're not paying their football coach all that much money in the first place.
Yeah, I guess don't underestimate cookie money, right?
Yeah.
We talk about oil money in Texas, but I guess sugar products in Utah seem to go a long way in terms of helping give your program some resources. I never really saw Kalani Sitake as a fit for Penn State. And when I say that is, I don't know that there are many better matches of coach and program than Kalani Sitake and BYU. I feel like he fits that place. And not to say that he wouldn't succeed at Penn State. I think he would. I think he's a really good coach. I've said a number of times, when you look at his track record at his time at BYU, they have been fairly consistent. They've been successful, and they have made this transition into a power conference pretty seamlessly. I mean, they had the very first year was a little bit rough, but since then they've been pretty good. And I kudos to BYU, their boosters, their donors, their administration, their leadership, their fan base for rallying around him at that moment, because it clearly meant a lot. When you heard him get emotional the other day talking about the reception and what the fan base and their reaction meant to him and his wife, you could tell it really mattered to him. And I think that's one thing that sometimes we forget when we talk about these coaches, because not everyone is a Lane Kiffin that is going to just take the best opportunity that comes up. A lot of these decisions are personal, and they involve your family. They involve a certain comfort level that you have and you developed in your community, with your team, with your program, your AD, your president, your administration, and all that stuff, I think, matters. It's the same reason why, 4 or 5 years ago, if Joey McGuire was having the success that he had at Texas Tech, then we would have been hearing left and right about, well, who's going to poach him and where's he going to end up coaching next? But you don't hear any of that right now, because he's got a pretty good comfort level. He's got a pretty good quality of life, and he's got a really good base in terms of roster budget, administration, leadership, all that stuff. And so when you check all those boxes, you look at a lot of these coaches in this cycle. Curt Cignetti stayed. Matt Rule stayed. A lot of these coaches who were targets have ended up staying. And yes, they got raises, and yes, they got contract extensions. But also, I think if you would have told me 10 years ago that the Indiana coach would say, no, I'm going to stay at Indiana and not go to Penn State, I would have thought you were crazy. But this is how much the sport has changed. Proof positive. Yesterday, the top 2 quarterback recruits in the country signed with Houston and Vanderbilt. The sport is changing in a big way, and moves like Sitake or Joey McGuire, Curt Cignetti staying where they are, I think, are a big sign of how much the tide is shifting in the sport.
I think Penn State also, maybe not Pat Kraft himself, but maybe organizationally from the top down, thought, if we make this move with Franklin now, our fans will be happy because the relationship has clearly run its course. And then we'll get a jump, and we'll have all these people that are coaches that are telling their agent, like, hey, Happy Valley, let's get up there. And I don't think that happened to the way that they wanted it to. Not that there weren't coaches interested, but I don't think they Like when they reached out to guys, it was maybe as excited as people thought that they would be.
Of course, because when we talk about what I just said with comfort level and not rocking the boat, when you look at what Penn State did, and this is not necessarily meant to be a huge defense of James Franklin, but they fired a guy who took them to the college football playoff semifinals. He took them on the doorstep of the national championship game. Coaches pay attention to that. And if you are in that type of pressure cooker, it's really hard to live up to that. I think that's a big reason why Matt Rule ended up not deciding to pursue that job, because that was the name that you heard off the bat was, hey, Matt Rule is tight with Pat Kraft, obviously played there and has history there at that program. And I know the Nebraska season hasn't gone quite to what people hoped it would be, but I think Matt Rule probably looked at that place and is thinking to himself, wow, if they fired that guy with that record and that success, what are they going to do if we take a few years to get this thing going? And so I think it speaks to making rash decisions to appease a fan base in a moment when sometimes it maybe is better to take some time and assess before you pull the trigger so quickly. Because I said it then when it happened, and I still stand by it now. I don't understand what you gained by doing it at that point in the season. I guess you got the jump on the head coaching search, but clearly that hasn't worked out, because if getting that far of a jump on the head coaching search, you should have had a coach by now. You should have had a coach by the end of the regular season or a few days after. The fact that we're sitting here on December 4th and you still don't have a coach, you clearly have botched the search. You clearly didn't know what you were getting into. And I think this reactionary, rash decision-making that we see, which is a byproduct of the era we're in and the instant gratification that the fans want, I get it. These guys are highly paid and you want them to succeed. But it wasn't like the program was falling apart. They had a really tough stretch for 3 games there. He had a really bad record against top 10 teams, but otherwise it was a really successful program. And I think coaches paid attention to that. Coaches see what impossible standard was set there for the next guy, because they're expecting the next guy to come take them to a national championship and win it. And that is not easy. There are very, very few programs that can do that. And it's not to say that Penn State isn't one of them, but it's a really hard thing to achieve. And I think coaches noticed that and said, why would I trade what I have now when I'm happy? Let's take Mike Elko, for example, Texas A&M. We're charging for a national championship right now, and we're in the mix. Why would I trade that in for Penn State when there's a lot of unknowns and there's that type of pressure cooker to step into?
So they gave out the awards today in the Big 12 game. We'll get to BYU and Texas Tech in a minute, but L.J. Martin, Offensive Player of the Year, the running back at BYU. There are a lot of quarterbacks that flamed out or were injured or just did not finish well or flamed out. Jacob Rodriguez, I think that's a no-brainer, although David Bailey could be a part of that conversation among a couple of others. And then Kalani Sitake, Coach of the Year. Paul brought up the fact that you have a freshman quarterback that comes on campus in May and leads you to the championship game. And Joey had to be a part of that mix, but probably gets maybe overlooked because of all the roster and the changes and maybe not getting enough credit for making that happen too. It's not always an automatic. Your thoughts about those 3 particular parts of the
LJ Martin, terrific
team.
back, terrific player, certainly well-deserved, and a big part of this reason. And when you start a freshman quarterback, you need someone who can tote the ball and take the pressure off of him, and LJ Martin has done that for them. A Texas guy from El Paso, so you gotta love that. One-time Texas Tech commit, actually, believe it or not, and ended up changing up his recruitment, and then ended up on the West Coast, and then eventually to BYU. Kalani Sitake is a Coach of the Year. I think he's certainly well deserving. I think you could have voted for multiple guys. I think you could have voted for Kalani. You could have voted for Joey McGuire. I think you could have voted for Willie Fritz at Houston with the turnaround job that he did there. I think Brennan even maybe could deserve a little consideration. Yep. I mean, they were ready to fire that guy a year ago, and now they're 9-3. So he did a really good job. I think you could have given a lot of different guys that one. And for Defensive Player of the Year, I think it had to come from Texas Tech. I probably would have voted David Bailey, but Jacob Rodriguez, his resume is pretty impressive, and it's kind of hard to argue with it. So I think either one of those 2 guys, I don't have too much problem with.
Sam, just saw this. I guess it broke about a half hour ago that Deion Sanders is bringing Brennan Marion from Sacramento State, who is at UNLV, as his new offensive coordinator. That's kind of, look, Willie Simmons at FIU, who's the head coach at FIU, left Pham to go to Duke a couple years ago as a coordinator. Kane Womack, the same thing to go to Bama with Kalen DeBoer. What do you think of this hire, bringing Brennan Marion in to fix an offense that without Travis Hunter, without Shedeur Sanders and the rest of the crew just was woeful this year, and with a really good, talented freshman like Juju Lewis coming into his second year?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those two mix, Marion and Lewis, because Lewis is a promising talent, and I really liked what I saw of him late in the season. I think they really do have something with him as a quarterback, and you understand why he's a 5-star. I think he processes at a really good level. He's really smart. He gets the ball there. So I'm intrigued to see what the future looks like with him. I think from Brennan Marion's standpoint, a little bit of an unusual move to go from head coach to coordinator, but we've seen it in some instances. Like, as you mentioned, Kane Womack was one of them. Sean Lewis has done it before. He went from a MAC school to Colorado as the OC, and then eventually landed the head coaching job at San Diego State. I think Brennan Marion's ultimate goal is to be an FBS head coach. And I guess Sacramento State, it didn't look like the path to getting to the FBS is quite as clean or as quick as maybe it looked like on the surface when he took that job. So going to Colorado, and if you succeed there as a Power 4 coordinator, then you probably get yourself in the mix for some head coaching jobs at the FBS level a little bit easier there than at Sacramento State, because it just seems like, I think that's what Marion's goal is at this point. And if he's able to go in there and turn around that offense and get them going again, I think you would see him get a little bit of interest. So I think it has potential to be a good fit, because I think Marion is a good offensive mind. And I think he's done some really good creative stuff offensively. It's pretty much any stop he's been at. Intrigued to see how it works in the Big 12 for sure. I think it'll definitely make Colorado interesting. They always are, but I think it makes them even more interesting next year.
The game in Lubbock between Tech and BYU, 29-7. Tech just forced 3 turnovers. Bachmeier could not get anything done. He threw for a little bit, 188, but no running game for BYU. Here they are about a month or so later. Your thoughts, is there shrapnel inside BYU's head, or do you feel like, is this going to be much different than what we saw in Lubbock?
I think it will be just a little different. I think it is. I think having LJ Martin a little bit healthier, I think he was coming off the injury last time they played. So I don't know how close to 100% he was at that point. So having him a little bit more at full strength, I think will help them and keep this more competitive. But on the flip side, Texas Tech has beaten just about every team that they've played when they've had their quarterback healthy handily, convincingly. So I suspect Tech will probably do that here too. Maybe BYU makes it a little closer on the outset early on, but I do think eventually Texas Tech probably ends up winning this by double digits. I just think the defensive talent and the way they have played on that side of the ball, they have just been suffocating to everybody this year. And I just don't know, unless they just come out and they're undisciplined and they're relaxed and they feel like they've already won this thing and they're just kind of resting on their laurels. That's the only way I think I can see this becoming super, super close. I do think BYU will play hard, but I just think the talent level, the difference in the talent level from a defensive standpoint, to me, is too much to overcome. So I think Tech probably takes care of business.
I just think that I don't know what BYU can do matchup wise to change the fact that they couldn't get Bear Bachmeier loose. Like, he couldn't even roll out in the pocket. Like, they were just all over him. I don't know what would have changed between now and then, because it wasn't like I don't think it was necessarily like a talent thing. It was just a scheme thing where Tech just knew exactly how to take him out of his game.
I mean, listen, when you've got David Bailey, Romello Height, and Lee Hunter on the defensive line, there's just not very many Big 12 offensive lines equipped to handle that. It just isn't. And so, and if you choose to double team one of them, then that means one of the others is getting a one-on-one, and that's just really hard to contain. So if those three continue to play at the level that they have played this year, then I think it makes this thing pretty academic. If they don't, or if BYU somehow comes up with something schematically to kind of keep those guys at arm's length, then we're talking.
Yeah, I'm looking. Are you going to be there, Sam?
No, I'm going to be home this week. My kid's got his last soccer tournament of the fall season. So
only if you have to sit outside with no coat on.
Probably so.
I
don't
know.
I mean, it's going to be outside for sure. That we play all our matches outside. So.
No, don't William Henry Harrison it. It's not worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, man, it's great to have you. We'll know next week who's going to be in the playoff. The 12 teams looks like it's down to just what's going to happen with Notre Dame or Miami. Maybe Alabama blanks the bed and they put themselves in position, or who knows if BYU was to pull it off. And if they do, then the Big 12 will get, I don't think there's any doubt that they'll get 2 in because Tech is a lock no matter what.
I'm afraid if BYU gets blown out that the committee's going to use that as justification to leave them out, which would be really unfortunate. But
so you think that if they were to play 24-20, and we've put
BYU
up the scenarios, BYU you think gets in if it's 24-20?
Yeah. If we're looking at 41-17 or something like that, I think the conversation. Here's what I will say: this next week to 2 weeks, next few days going into the playoff, and couple weeks coming out of the playoff. If you thought last year was bad in terms of the discourse, I'm afraid it's going to be worse this time. I'm not looking forward to that. Like, that's one thing about the playoff thing is it has gotten, the discourse about it has gotten a little bit toxic, and it makes it less fun. Like, I'm excited about the playoff itself. I'm not excited to listen to everybody's half-baked take about who should and should not be in the playoff.
Yep. Bruce Feldman, I know with the athletic.com, Bruce, he threw the F-bomb out there.
Bruce
I loved it.
I saw that. I was like, ooh, Bruce was hot.
Did you see Nicole Auerbach's reaction? So Nicole's it was fantastic. And he just basically said what everybody else was thinking, and it just blurted out from him. I thought it was great. Thanks for your time, Sam. We'll talk to you again next week. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.